What's up, wrestling fans? Two Bros Wrestling Show coming at you. Kevin, what's going on?
Well, it's Father's Day that this show is
Uh,
dropping, so that's going on for one.
yes, it is.
And to all the dads out there watching, happy Father's Day, and to our the wrestling dad here on our program, whose son sometimes makes appearances on the show.
Mhm.
Happy Father's Day, Doug.
Oh, thank you. Hey, appreciate that.
Tonight we are talking in our main event a topic that is, I know, of interest to if you're watching this, you're interested in tonight's topic because the wrestling landscape is changing. And if you watch Worlds Collide last weekend, you saw a preview of how that change may be occurring. Our main event tonight is WWE's style of lucha. What we think so far, what we think Worlds Collide means for the future of this relationship that WWE now has with AAA, as well as what it means for all of Lucha Libre, because Doug, this is not going to be affecting just the company that WWE
Mhm.
purchased.
This is so true. We have, AAA's main competition south of the border, WWE's main competition north of the border, and, what does this mean for everybody else globally, too? Is this the start of what Triple H wanted to do years ago and take NXT global?
Alliances are being formed, sides are being chosen, and we're going to break it
Mhm.
all down in our main event. But before we do,
Ooh, news.
we got our opening bell. This week in the news, Doug, a good story to kick us off in our opening bell segment as it ties into our main event that we're going to talk about. And that is that last weekend's Worlds Collide is the largest live YouTube stream in WWE history. The show peaked with more than
Yeah.
764,000 live viewers, and last I checked, we're over or right around 3 million or so on demand views since. Obviously, and this is part of what we'll be talking about in our main event, is sustainment is going to be the key. But
Hmm.
this is the proof, really, that there is no question that there is a curiosity there that may just be the tip of the iceberg. Obviously, a very, very encouraging start for WWE and AAA.
Very good for AAA and this new, well, it's not really a partnership, is it? Because it has been absorbed
It's
into
an
the TKO
acquisition.
family. So, yeah.
Another major story this week is something that's been expected but is now official, and that is that Warner Brothers Discovery is splitting into two separate publicly traded companies.
Mhm.
Studios and Streaming is the company that will focus on production and the streaming business of Warner Brothers. And then the other is going to be called Global Networks, and that will be operating the traditional TV brands like your CNNs. And of course, the reason
Okay.
I'm talking about all this, AEW's TV partners, TNT and TBS. While
Hmm.
nothing obviously is going to change for AEW at this time, this company split won't happen until next year, I believe. It's going to be
Okay.
interesting, though, to see and watch how it all plays out, because AEW's TV product is obviously going to be housed under the Global Networks company. However, now that the streaming is separate and a separate company, we'll have to see how this affects AEW's streaming on HBO Max, and more specifically, the plans that have yet to come to fruition that have long been talked about of the Max platform being the
Hmm.
home for AEW pay per views. If those are in separate companies now, that may have gotten a lot more complicated and less likely to occur. There's got to be a reason why it hadn't happened already, and this may be it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, this probably is why we're not getting those max pay-per-views just yet.
Yep. We'll keep an eye on it and let you know if that does change at any point in the future as this relationship evolves. Um,
Sounds good.
Speaking of evolving relationships, this one is good news for the NWA and its fans. Doug, don't know if you saw this, but starting July 29th, NWA Power will begin airing on the Roku channel.
Oh, okay.
Tuesdays at 8 p.m. This is the first deal in more than a quarter of a century, the first weekly new episode deal the NWA has signed that is exclusive in more than a quarter century. So Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. on the Roku channel. It is free. You don't have to own a Roku, despite the name Roku channel. Roku channel is available on many different streaming devices. You don't need a Roku. So it's an app. Get it. Tuesday nights, 8 o'clock. Well, I guess that's opposite NXT, but
right?
yeah. But I'm sure it's on demand on there as well. I'm just excited to have an opportunity to be watching the NWA project again. I always liked it. I was not going to go over to Twitter/X to do it to watch, which is how they had been airing their broadcast up until this good news.
Yeah, this is good for William Patrick Corrigan. Good job, Billy.
Good for William Patrick Corrigan. Doug, how are you feeling about Blake Monroe?
Who?
That's the new name for the former Mariah May.
I missed that. Yeah, I don't like that at all.
I thought it'd be some take on, Ricky Saints, Ricky Starks, like it's close enough. But suddenly, it is the glamour, but it's the glamour Blake Monroe. The more I've lived with it, I've been, since Tuesday, been living with it, and I'm like, I see what they're doing. They kind of got like the vignettes were a little 50-ish, 60-ish, like there's a retro vibe going on. You got the Marilyn Monroe thing in there.
Like a timeless Tony Storm? Is that what they're doing?
It was a little like mix of Marilyn Monroe with like 1960s Bewitched. So it's
okay. So it's a few decades up, but still,
yeah,
it's
similar.
Tony's gimmick. Okay,
we'll see how
she could have been introduced as like an 80s rock chick, I guess. So
oh, that would have been funny. Obviously Mariah May is talented enough that she's going to make anything work.
Right.
And these vignettes, when you see them, I think you will not have any protest about the fact that because of NXT's writing and WWE's production and Mariah May's talent, this is going to work. And it's already like, okay, this is she will be lucky to stick around NXT for very long, that Triple H won't be trying to steal her away from Shawn. No doubt about it.
I guess I need to get caught up on my NXT then. I didn't realize that they dropped the name, and I don't like the name. I need to see this. I guess, but I don't like the name, and it sounds like, a mild update to Timeless Tony Storm. So
give it a watch, and I will check back with you, because I do want to know your take on this, and it may be a grower to see how they, play it out on TV. Because at first I'm like, oh man, can we get something? And then by the end, and on the vignettes, she was on several times. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of liking this.
Okay.
Something that I'm probably won't be liking, but tight shorts and tight shirts are back in, brother. At least if Hulk Hogan has his way. Have you heard about Hulk Hogan trying to save Hooters?
No. Is he doing this with Bischoff too? Is this another Bischoff Hogan project?
The Real American Beer Company, so Hogan's beer project, which I don't know if Eazy-E's involved in that I know of, but they are making an attempt to save Hooters, which filed for bankruptcy earlier this year. They're looking to make a bid. I know, to buy all of Hooters' assets as well as all of the chain stores. Now, there are significant obstacles facing Hogan, not the least of which is that there is another group tied to one of the Hooters' original founders who already own a bunch of the franchises that are also trying to make a bid. You would think they would be in the pole position in this one. And then there's also a little matter of a federal liquor law that prohibits alcohol companies from owning restaurants. So Hogan's going to have to figure his way around that one as well. Again, a story will follow if Hulk Hogan ends up owning Hooters. We will definitely be reporting it here on the show.
Oh, man. Okay. You got any
WWE,
good news?
Yeah, here's some good news.
Okay.
WWE has announced its latest NIL class, the fifth NIL class, and there are three names that definitely stick out as next generation stars. So, as part of this class, we hopefully, if they make it through the program and make it to the next level in our TV screens, we will be seeing the sons of Scott Steiner, Mark Henry,
Oh, oh,
and Titus O'Neil.
oh,
So a lot
oh.
of next gen stars in this NIL
So,
class.
so Mark Henry's son was in AEW briefly, right? Or at least had some like screen time in
He
AEW.
had, you're right about the screen time, and
Yeah.
that he was
Yeah.
training to be a
Okay.
wrestler. If I
All
recall, I
right.
think he was training with maybe Devon. If I
Yeah, yeah, I think
recall,
something like that. So, and then Steiner's son. So, oh, we could have a Steiner Cousins tag team eventually then.
I mean, would that not be awesome for those that loved Scott and Rick back in the
Uh-huh.
day? And Seth could use another member of his faction. We'll
Sure.
see.
Let's start another bloodlines adjacent group, I guess.
More good news, Doug, about people getting jobs or potential jobs, I guess, in the case of the NIL class. But this one's a done deal. Alex Windsor is all elite. Alex Windsor is who, you say? If you're not familiar with the international wrestling scene, she was most recently the IWGP Women's Champion in New Japan, and she has, after losing that championship, made the announcement to the crowd that she is, in fact, all elite. She's a 16-year veteran and the significant other of one Will Ospreay, which will probably make travel a whole lot easier.
Yes.
Probably help with Will's jet lag, because I'm pretty sure he kept bouncing over to
Mm-hmm.
the old world. But maybe now he can stick around in America now that his significant other is also with AEW.
That's
Congratulations.
yeah, that's good for the Osprey clan. Awesome.
And then while on the topic of recent AEW signings, let's talk about, I guess it's Tekla, now that I heard that
Tekla.
Tony.
Yes. Tekla.
It's very interesting style about her. I liked her. I don't know what you
Mm-hmm.
thought of she
I,
just had
I
her first match.
I do
But
like
the reason
I do.
I wanted to point it out, I don't know if you knew this, is that she's not just a wrestler. Did you also know she's the guitarist and vocalist for the punk rock band Death Row Groupies?
I did not know that. So, along with the Butcher, there's two rock stars in AEW then.
More than just two, because obviously you have it's a theme with AEW, because obviously you got Chris Jericho
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
Fozzy, and then there's also Brody King, who's not only
Really?
when he's not hurting
I
people
did
in the
not.
ring, he is the vocalist for the hardcore band God's Hate.
I did not know Brody had a band. And I
God's
was
Hate.
just kind of disqualifying Jericho since he's off TV right now. So,
And I don't know what it is too. Not only does AEW have this theme of musicians, but they're all on the heavier side of the ledger when
oh
it
well,
comes to rock.
yeah, they absolutely are.
I know that goes hand in hand with wrestling a little bit, but you got a hardcore band, a punk band,
Hmm.
and Fozzy.
And Fozzy. Hey, they tuned down
um,
a full step, so
that's right. That's right.
it's
Um,
heavy.
so here's a good story to end on and transition us into our main event. Just a programming note for those watching, especially if you're watching us on Facebook. Facebook is changing some of their retention policies,
Oh
and here in
no.
June, for channels like ours, what that means is that any broadcast that we had done live will live on Facebook for 30 days, but anything after 30 days is deleted. So
Mm,
um, continue watching us on Facebook. We appreciate however you watch us, but you can always
absolutely.
have access to those new episodes there. But if you ever want to go check out anything in the archives, the good news is that YouTube still has those. So please go over there and subscribe. Follow us on both. That way you don't miss a thing.
Absolutely. Don't miss the thing. Don't miss a thing with us. Oh, main event time, folks.
And when I said it was a good transition, that is because, as I mentioned at the opening, tonight our main event topic is WWE's acquisition of AAA. And while we would not be going in depth on the background of AAA and Lucha Libre and everything that leads up to this, we did already do that. So that's the transition. It is in the archives on Facebook right now for a little while longer, and in YouTube, our channel there. It was 2 years ago, Doug, that we did our entire broadcast
Wow,
around the hit. I know it doesn't feel like it's that long
it
already, but
doesn't.
we did a deep dive, and obviously we could still only scratch the surface when it was our topic for the full hour. But if you want the context, it would be a good companion view to the show we're
Hmm.
doing tonight, because we go into the history of CMLL and how AAA controversially broke off from there and how that affected the entire lucha scene. So all of that is good background for what we're talking about tonight. So, because in a nutshell, that's it. CMLL is the oldest professional wrestling organization in the world. AAA is a break-off organization that
Hmm.
happened in the 90s. Again, the show we did earlier goes into all the details as to the who, when, where, and how of that. But that's really what you need to know that sets this up is you have two competitors. Sounds familiar, right? A number
Right?
one and a number two. But
And
that's the situation they have in Mexico. And AAA, the breakoff organization, has been acquired by WWE. We found that out during WrestleMania
hmm
weekend. While the other organization,
hmm
CMLL, has a
partner.
close,
Yeah.
close partnership with WWE's competition, AEW. It's intriguing, the setup that we're currently seeing
Yes. Very
break
much.
down. And Doug, this is not obviously something that is going to be limited to let's see what happens in Mexico. Because of this now, these battle lines are not just in Mexico. It's now a worldwide fight. For, if you want to be dramatic, the soul of Lucha Libre.
That is pretty dramatic, but
It,
yeah, you're right.
it's true.
Because I mentioned briefly last week, seeing Vikingo slow down his style in the main event of Worlds Collide against Chad Gable, seeing him slow that down and more of a WWE lucha style, really, than what I think after watching Worlds Collide. Because again, I'm not super familiar. I'm more familiar with Japanese wrestling than the Lucha Libre style, but seeing that, see a lot of speed, a lot of stuff in AEW really. A lot of that is I think plucked more from Lucha Libre than the Japanese style that they seem to recruit from.
And you've mentioned it just now. We've mentioned it earlier. We've been talking obviously a lot, and the whole wrestling world's been talking a lot about Worlds Collide. So I think maybe that's a good place to start before we
Yes,
even get into the broader
so
implications.
true.
But before we even do that, I just want to stipulate up front, as if you can't tell by looking at us, you're looking at two middle-aged white guys, wrestling fans from America, and I want to admit to that bias, unintentional or otherwise, that we don't have, as Doug mentioned, a deep connection to the history and culture of lucha the way that someone
Mhm.
who is a fan in Mexico who grew up watching it the way that Doug and I grew up watching Jim Crockett, right? So I
There you
know that you
go.
all are
Yeah,
going to
great
see all of
example.
this different. So if it hits differently for you, depending on which side of that divide you are on, we would love to hear from any of our
Absolutely,
watchers.
yes.
If you are in Mexico or Central America and you have grown up in Lucha Libre, I want to know what you think and how this is affecting you and how excited and or worried you are about all of this, because we do realize that it is a different thing for us not having that historic connection to AAA and Lucha in general.
Hmm.
So, Doug, before we
Yeah,
get into the speculation of what this acquisition may
right.
mean, let's talk about what we don't have to speculate about, and that is what we know, what we saw with our own eyes. Worlds Collide last weekend. What were some of your takeaways, just in general, of like the broadcast? Did you enjoy the show? What did you think about the
I
production?
honestly, I love the show. The show was great. Lucha is a very colorful version of wrestling. I'm not that, used to, but is incredibly colorful. Even more so. I after seeing I don't know if I should call this real lucha instead of WWE or even AEW. Americanized lucha maybe is better. But after seeing a real AAA show, and it's so much, there's so much color and so much, I don't know, energy there, I guess is what I'm looking for.
There definitely is that. It's certainly a more character based
Yes.
version of wrestling, and it's something we always kind of knew of lucha. It's just again we don't watch it on the regular, and so you tune into this show, and if you don't know anything about lucha, it's going to look very. It didn't look. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Because it didn't look like a normal WWE production, and
Hmm.
that's certainly not what you want, I think, as a fan that's hoping to see something different and to hope that if you're a fan of AAA or Lucha Libre, you probably hope that it doesn't resemble a standard WWE show, even if it is maybe slightly different than what you're used to. And I think in that regard, it probably was a success. For me, I know that some of the things I took away from it is that, as we mentioned up top, obviously the interest is there. Millions of people watch Worlds Collide.
Hmm.
I know partially that's going to be because it was free, but I think it's reasonable that as far as how Worlds Collide is going to affect things moving forward, I think it's reasonable to think that if you're a wrestling fan, you already are subscribed to Peacock and or
Hmm.
Netflix, and therefore this isn't going to be an extra cost for you. If they want to start putting it behind a paywall, they might not get 3 million viewers, but if you're a wrestling fan or like what you saw, you may, if you're subscribed to one of these platforms already, you're going to tune in and watch a AAA WWE co-production. I believe. I think they can get
Hmm.
people watching this. I think that was a good gateway drug into what is to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if this was more for the international audience to put it on YouTube for those folks who don't necessarily have access
Yeah.
or easy access to Netflix, Peacock, things like that. Let's go ahead and show a commitment to this and do a joint, a WWE style production with a high production value, but keep it true, or what I'm assuming is true to a AAA production.
That's a very, very good point because I think that by putting it on YouTube, you probably are one guaranteed that you could go out afterwards with the talking point of the most
Hmm.
successful YouTube broadcast in our
Oh,
history.
well,
That
yeah.
was probably an easy given. And it is. You're not trying to sell people on something they don't know. You'll get the curiosity seekers that'll hopefully be sold on what you're showing them. Give the first one away for free. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially when they already had a PLE later on that night. And the reviews have been positive. I think for the most part, I've not heard a lot of pushback on any
Hmm.
negativity around the event. I think that as far as takeaways that again we can walk away from Worlds Collide with is that the talent is obviously there. The characters were very over, resonated with that crowd. Um, the, I mean, we'll see how many times he gets mentioned tonight, but there's already talk on how quickly
Yeah.
WWE can move to get Mr. Iguana into the WWE marketing machine to get to move
And,
products, right?
and I really wonder, you know, my I really wonder what AAA fans think of Mr. Iguana. Is he as over with them as he is with me? Because I think he's awesome and entertaining. I love the puppet. I love the whole thing. But do they look at him like Santino Morello? I don't know. I,
Because they have so many colorful characters, he's probably. I mean, while yes, he is definitely attention getting. He's he's not the same kind of outlier that Santino is compared to the other things around him. Because there were, whether it's Psycho Clown or like there are some over the top characters that
well, he probably
probably
should
makes
be.
him not stand up.
But the comedy aspect is it's just like, oh God, how many times can we
Yeah,
see him wrestle the puppet? But the one great thing about it was everybody's into the act. Everybody
yeah,
gets
oh
along
yeah.
with it. Okay, we got guys wrestling the iguana puppet, and
And that is, whatever you think of these colorful characters, that is definitely more flamboyant than the style we're used to. If again, we're starting here looking at Worlds Collide and what this might mean for future possibilities with this relationship, well, that's an obvious one. Not just Mr. Iguana, just these I mean, where there's more characters in general, there is more opportunity for mask toys. Like,
Yes.
you can't do that with a Kevin Owen. Like, I mean, you sell a Kevin Owen T-shirt, but you don't have all the other accoutrements. You can sell
Hmm.
the iguana toy, the puppet, the mask. There's a
The
whole lot more
glasses,
you
the
can
round
do,
glasses, you can do so much with him.
and they're all so they would resonate with kids, and I think that's going to be a
Hmm.
big part of what is probably going to be the merchandise end of this relationship. That is probably going to be a lot more than your standard NIL athlete that's coming in
Yeah.
through NXT, like we talked about earlier. Doug, announce team. What does the announce team say for the future of this relationship? We don't know that it's permanent. I know last week you called out Corey as your performer of the week for the great work he did. Had a little knock on Conan being grouchy old man, but do you
Yeah.
like them as a team, as a combo? Do you think that there's a
I do.
possibility there?
I do like them as a team.
English
Conan,
announce team. We should say English
English,
announce
and,
team.
and I do like that too. That the traditional place of what we know as the Spanish announce table is. I noticed an English announce table, so I'm wondering how often it gets destroyed in these productions from now on. But
uh,
yeah, I do like Corey because Corey does a lot of. It seems that he's done his homework, and
yeah.
there's that not really bickering, but that interaction back and forth between him and Conan. It felt to me like Conan was just trying a grumpy old man trying to sell the product, and I don't really think he needed to try and push the product because it really did speak for itself. But
I think Conan needs a little work. It was definitely not smooth. Corey was great. I do think, though, that if I think it's important, whether it's Conan or someone like Conan, to have the white guy on commentary be balanced out by someone actually from the culture who
Mhm.
knows the background. Yes, Corey did a lot of homework, but there was an authenticity to Conan as someone who's been involved with AAA for so long. When he started, he told a lot of stories, but once he starts going off on this person's cousin's uncle was trained
Yeah,
by and
yeah,
this move, like that, there's so much background to this whole organization that we as American fans, English speaking fans who are hopefully going to be tuning into this, we don't know any of that. So just from the history aspect alone, I think it is cool to have someone from AAA balance Corey out to, well, add color, right? Color commentary.
yeah,
I think that
yeah.
if it is it Conan, is he the one? Time will tell.
Hmm.
But I do think that there needs to be someone there from AAA to let us know the backstories of these wrestlers, because unlike most of the American wrestling, who we maybe have followed some of these folks for so long, we know their backstories. It can be intimidating to learn like a character that has a long
Hmm.
history. We're going to have to learn that for all of these wrestlers for the most part, which is a lot to try to bring forward.
Hmm. It, it was just me, or was it odd that Conan did a hard sell of these guys are really going to have to prove themselves to like the WWE folks to, their fight. He did that quite often, almost in every match. He talked about people basically fighting for their jobs. I don't know if he ever used those terms, but
It sounded it.
it was very implied, you know,
I wonder how much programming the announcers had as far as in the ear, or was it,
right
we trust you to go out there and, well, again, it's a co-production, so maybe they didn't want to overstep by being too, put the foot on the pedal
there.
too hard. So
Hmm.
I wonder if Conan had a little bit of leeway there, and maybe it was talking from truth, because I'm
Hmm.
sure it is true that most of these guys looked at it as this is a big opportunity for us to not just impress the world, but the new bosses are back there, and we know that they're handing out contracts. That everyone that was on the Worlds Collide event, by the way, is signed to WWE. That was taken care of
Okay.
beforehand. There's a lot of folks in AAA though beyond that what appeared who are not yet signed. So I'm sure there is a sense of there's competition here, and we need to prove
Hmm.
ourselves. And they went out like it was a little NXT in that way, that they looked like they were going out with a chip on their shoulders with something to prove, because they
Yeah.
really did have something to prove. I think another thing Worlds Collide can tell us pretty safely, we can see the future of how this is going to look and that is Rey Mysterio is your legendary figurehead that they're going to
Mm-hmm.
leverage in every situation they can to bring the English-speaking world and the Spanish-speaking world together to watch AAA, with Rey as the figurehead and Vikingo as the star.
Yeah, I don't know if I imagined this, but going from Worlds Collide over the weekend to Raw, SmackDown this week, and when they were cutting things back in, was Ray doing his own overdubs in English at points? Because it seemed like he was, there
Oh, I
was
don't
like,
know.
I, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I was thinking, wait, Ray said all that in Spanish on the show, but now it's for an primarily English speaking audience, and it was either something kind of Raw or maybe something on Friday night on SmackDown. I noticed where he was talking and his talking points were
It
in
was,
English. And I was like,
huh.
wait, I'm certain he did that in Spanish.
That
Because
is
he
something
spoke,
that I have to go back to the tape for that because I can't remember how they presented it
right?
when they showed replays. But I do know that live, a lot of the stuff on Worlds Collide, which I thought was great, was in
Hmm.
Spanish only,
Yes.
without trying to cater to the English audience. Now
Yes.
the pre tapes all had subtitles. I'm fine
Subtitles.
with that.
Hmm.
And Doug and I have had this conversation off air. Like the primary obstacle for us ever getting into AAA or Lucha Libre in the past is not the characters, the action, the access. Like now we have access. It's 9 times out of 10, it's the language barrier. So if you take away the
Yeah.
language barrier by giving us subtitles and an English announce team, you better believe we're going to show up. A lot of wrestling fans will, who maybe otherwise
Hmm.
wouldn't, just because I don't know what's going on and I don't know the
Right.
story, and I just see flipping and flopping and flying around, and you can
Yes.
enjoy a match to some level like that. But when you do know what's going on, there's a reason WWE employs so many different announce teams in different languages now. Whatever country you're from, you want to hear the action and the stories in your own language.
Hmm.
And it, having Ray as a figurehead, a bilingual figurehead who's known the world over, I don't think anyone's going to argue with the decision that he is the de facto face of this. And I don't
Hmm.
think, Doug, you'll disagree with me
Face.
that Vinkingo is the guy that you build around.
Yes, he's definitely the guy
He
with
is
all
the guy.
this.
Um, I guess if there's one Worlds Collide takeaway that I would just say is a caution for WWE in their acquisition of AAA, and I know that this is set up as Worlds Collide, and the original was supposed to be, the same, where it's like you have folks from this promotion going up against folks for that promotion. But moving forward, I just would like to see the announcers and the promotion get away a little bit from the us
Hmm.
versus them, the WWE versus AAA, the keeping score, the code of like, all right, you're
Who
all
knew was,
three and we're
yeah.
one. And I just think that it, just from the perspective of wrestling history, it has never really worked out great when one promotion acquires another. Whether it's WWE buying WCW and ECW, Tony Khan buying Ring of Honor, Jim Crockett buying
Hmm.
UWF, you could go on and on. The temptation is always there. Oh, we're going to do our own invasion angle, or we're going to do promotion
Hmm.
versus promotion. And when they do that, invariably, the purchased product gets the short end of the stick. So I hope Triple H, who is a big wrestling history nerd, has learned his lesson from that. And let's get away from WWE is 3 and we're 1, because I guarantee you that if you start going down that route, you're going to have Andrade beating Mr. Iguana all the time, because WWE doesn't want to look weak. I just don't
Hmm.
want it to be us versus them. That's not going to,
Right.
big picture. That's not going to work for me.
Yeah, yeah, Conan did lean heavily into that too, along with the, hey, these guys are fighting for their jobs, but it's us versus you guys. You guys are three ahead right now.
Yeah.
We've got to get back on the board kind of stuff. So I thought that was odd too, actually.
For one night event where you're introducing it, you can get away with it, but that can't be the story going forward. You need a triple A product that has some mix in of NXT and WWE guys. You don't need it to be, let's have every match be triple A guys versus our guys, because then it instantly becomes a promotion versus promotion thing. And you're either going to make WWE look weak by losing to people that no one in America knows, or you're going to bury your new acquisition by always having them look like the B team to
And,
your WWE stars.
and you and I have both been part of acquisitions in our professional lives, and that whole
Yeah.
us versus them, it never works out well, kayfabe or otherwise. It needs to be rolled into go team, and
Yeah.
I would like to see that a lot sooner rather than later with this.
And in the real world, it tends to be the purchased asset that also
Yes,
doesn't fare as well.
yes.
Which is probably a good way to jump into the bigger picture of that purchase asset and how this looks moving beyond Worlds Collide. Hey, we had this great event. We all loved it. I have
Hmm.
heard very little pushback, even from the internet wrestling community, on the way that it was presented. That's one show. Bigger picture. This is a deal that's not even like official yet, right? I think they close in the fall or whatever. So, bigger picture, let's look at some of the possible negatives to all of this. And we'll do negatives first so that we can end on the positives. I think there's some positives that we can
Hmm.
discuss here. But potential negatives to this, Doug, I have some notes here for some pathway around some talking points
Okay.
I wanted to make sure we discussed. And that is the first probably worry if you are a diehard Lucha Libre fan from Mexico, is that this is just going to be cultural dissolution of Lucha Libre.
Hmm.
That WWE may alter AAA's identity to fit its own storytelling model. This could diminish like a lot of what is traditional lucha, the mass culture, the match pacing you referenced earlier. Like Vinkingo might be
Hmm.
working, slower. I think some could say that a compromise between the two styles might actually be a good thing for the athletes. But I can also
Yes.
see where if you're a diehard, I don't like WWE. I like
Hmm.
my cultural lucha libre here in Mexico, here in Central America, and I can see where that person may worry that this is going to change the style and cultural dilution of lucha libre.
You know, everything I know about Vikingo before Worlds Collide, I learned from AEW. And, we talked Jacob Fatu, all gas, no brakes. That's all I've ever seen from Vikingo
Yeah,
is all gas, no brakes. I don't think the man knows how to spell brake, because he is just, warp speed all the time and putting his body on the line so much from what I've seen in AEW, I presume that's the way he wrestles in AAA because that's why he had to drop their mega championship anyway.
yeah.
Never defeated, just had to drop it because he was injured. So a WWE style is probably going to add, many, many matches to his career. But it was not painful, but awkward to watch him against Chad Gable because immediately all I was thinking was they've slowed him down. That this is a much slower paced match than maybe he's used to wrestling. And is this him getting acclimated to a WWE style? I, you know,
You think they can
I
find
don't
a
know.
middle ground? Do you think a middle ground
Yeah,
is what's necessary?
I do because I don't think, and again, I'm not a lucha expert, but from what I'm seeing, everybody else on that card seemed to be wrestling a more aggressive, what I think of as more of a AEW flippy floppy high flyers, which I love flippy floppy high flyers. So Vikingo slowed down a bit.
Now, I do think that this whole idea of the cultural delusion of Lucha Libre is obviously a criticism and a concern that WWE knows just as well as we do, because I think that they are putting a bellwether up against that, and they showed it on Saturday Worlds Collide. If you notice, in some pre-tapes, they had Conan talk about in being very specific to say WWE will not Americanize lucha. And I thought I was actually a little shocked, to be
Hmm.
perfectly honest, that they went with the term Americanized instead
Right.
of change or something a
Hmm.
little less, I guess maybe incendiary. But
Right.
maybe they did so intentionally because that probably is the biggest fear, especially with America, maybe not the most popular country on the international stage right now in some places, that a lot of folks in Mexico and Central America probably think an American company owning part of our cultural heritage and
Mm-hmm.
possibly changing it would be the worst thing that could happen to Lucha Libre. So rather than just say we're not going to change it, Conan specifically said they're not going to Americanize it,
Americanize
as
it.
if many people watching may just not even care for the Americanized style of wrestling.
Right, because you think about the majority of talent that WWE has pulled from Lucha Libre, because Andrade was what, La Sombra, and had a mask. Escobar, don't know
Oh yeah,
what he was, but he had a
Adam
mask.
asked.
These were Lucha traditional masks when they came to WWE. Even El Generico, not the most traditional of Lucha Libre, but even El Generico lost his mask when he came to WWE.
That is part of the cultural element of luchas, the mask, and there could be a fear as like WWE may want less masks because too many people in masks might get confusing for American audience, which is an obstacle possibly that I did have on the list to talk about as far
Oh,
as
that's
what
yeah.
the barrier to get over. And then there's the loss of creative autonomy, and I know that this is supposedly it's an acquisition. The AAA bookers and executives are still, for the most part, not everyone was retained, but most are to run sort of a separate company. But come on, we know obviously Alberto Del Rio is not being mentioned. He was the
Right.
champion even when they were advertising Vinkingo was the champion, so they'd already booked that
Hmm.
change. I mean, there
Yeah.
is a loss of creative autonomy here. The AAA folks may still be in place, and I'm sure they have input, but when the buck stops, it's obvious who's pulling the strings here, and that's
Mhm.
WWE.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's this is a concern I think that a lot of people may have, Doug, and that is that it's a pipeline, right? Because I think WWE sort of
Hmm.
showed by the fact that this maybe isn't, here's our new acquisition, and it's maybe not a Raw or SmackDown, but we filled it full of NXT guys, so it almost is like that's the level where they think that AAA
Yes.
maybe is. And so if you're worried about your historic AAA and think that this could be a talent pipeline, right? This is how you find the next Andrade or Delgado, Fantasma, like you
Hmm.
mentioned, like the people on the main roster, maybe we're going to take Vinkingo and we'll put him on Raw, and you're going to lose him in AAA because we're just
Hmm.
going to use this as a pipeline to the main roster. We're
But
going to pluck your
really,
talent.
I haven't these promotions like CMLL, AAA, even New Japan. These have been really these pipelines anyway in the past. It's just a much more formal pipeline now. I mean, because look at the talent like we've talked about, like Andrade's come from there, Rey Mysterio.
Yeah.
It already exists. It's just such more of a formal pipeline. It's almost like another NXT now. So
Yeah, I mean, it truly is another NXT, and you're going to look at that either positively or negatively if you're wanting autonomy because I mean that's just that ship sailed, right? Because I mean,
yeah, and
you're acquired, you're no longer autonomous. That's just
right,
not going to happen.
but some of these guys, like everything I've seen this past week, everybody is hot for Mr. Iguana.
Yeah.
So you lose that autonomy, but you also get some major opportunity there too for certain talents.
Well, yes, absolutely for certain talents because there
Hmm.
is a risk of talent not overexposure, but maybe underexposure,
Yeah,
underuse. Because if WWE does choose to pipeline this situation or to only pick and choose certain AAA stars to highlight on the broader shows, which they obviously did, because not everybody in AAA signed the WWE,
right,
not
right,
everyone's even getting mentioned. Some folks we intentionally don't mention, but
right.
there is a history of WWE maybe misusing or sidelining some of its international um,
Hmm.
they don't always know what to do. Now, obviously, you have a whole team at AAA, which will hopefully help in this situation. But the track record hasn't always been great. Let's just be
Right.
honest.
Yeah, it hasn't.
Doug, there also, I think, is outside of AAA, just the idea of the fact that while WWE may be good for AAA, we'll get to that in a minute. For the rest of Lucha Libre, WWE's presence in Mexico it's obviously going to crowd out small promotions, monopolize all the venues,
Hmm.
take all the top talents. I mean, this one's just a fact. I don't know that you can even argue this one the other way, as one only needs to look at America's old territory system to know what WWE
Hmm.
corporate wrestling does to small promotions, right?
Right. And this is, beyond WWE corporate wrestling. This is TKO corporate wrestling, the company that does not
That's
care
right.
to cancel a WrestleMania and move it to a city with a higher bid after it's already been announced.
Yeah, this is a WWE, and maybe it's a terrible analogy on steroids, but this is truly the most powerful WWE's ever been.
Yeah.
And if I'm running an independent in Mexico, I'm having to think that this is the beginning of the end.
I mean, look what it did to British wrestling with, NXT UK
Yes.
that, yeah,
It,
that eventually died. So,
After first killing off the independent wrestling
hmm
scene in Britain, which is starting to make some headway as to recovery, but it's going to take a while because it did decimate things. And if this doesn't work out, what's left in Mexico if WWE comes through, acquires AAA, and then in the end decides to cut its losses as corporations are wont to do? And what's
hmm
left? One thing, I
CMLL.
guess, yeah, there we go. That's the segue. Obviously,
Hmm.
but looking beyond the independents, though, this is still a threat to CMLL, right? Because it's the world's
Hmm.
oldest promotion, AAA's chief rival, which we mentioned earlier. But do you see CMLL staying strong with this partnership with AEW and the help that they have with AEW? We have Grand Slam Mexico
Yeah.
just coming this week, or is this the start of a slow WCW NWA regression in the face of the bigger competition until they just are shell of themselves and go under?
I would think ideally, like, in like the corporate world, especially in the business world we exist in, it's much better for organizations to group together into larger networks. And I think the same is good for, wrestling organizations at this point. We're going to see these wrestling networks like, AEW, CMLL, aligning against the Titan. Well, that is
Yeah,
TKO, WWE, and AAA
lots of
now.
lots
I
of puns.
know, I know. Didn't mean to do it, but it happened.
I don't think anything will happen short term. I think CMLL
Hmm.
is strong enough. Actually, the stronger of the two organizations before the acquisition, that they will weather this for a while. But it could be a slow erosion depending on just how big this gets, because it's a partnership with AEW. It's not an ownership
Hmm.
situation. So if AEW doesn't do well, and they've been hit or miss on the financial side in the
Yeah.
last year and a half, they're going to save their own selves, and CML could be left to swim on their own. And there is no other dance partners, so
Hmm.
um, it could be bad if this really takes off for CMLL in the long term. I don't think
Yeah.
anything will happen, but it could be a slow, painful death for fans of CMLL and Lucha Libre if it starts to go in that direction. Which
I,
maybe that's another thing to talk about possible negative, Doug, and that's the alienation of long term Lucha Libre fans. They just may reject a WWE stylized product, and you won't have the local support, which they
hmm.
probably don't need the YouTube views from around the world. They're still going to need to rely on people showing up to arenas in Mexico.
Right. Yeah. But, just a turnout from that there was at Worlds Collide seems that they're off to an incredibly, incredibly hot start.
In Los
And
Angeles.
Well, yeah, that's it too. Because I think most of those fans that packed that house were AAA fans,
Yeah,
and
no
you
doubt.
have a bunch of marks trying to get in there to that can do the well. Actually, Lucha Libre, blah blah blah. Those marks like us that we can't do, but are more versed in lucha. Are showing up for this show. But I
Well,
think it was a packed house.
I think that though is a fair distinction in that you had a packed house that was very into the AAA product, and then you took Octagon Junior to
Hmm.
across the street, and he didn't get the same reaction. So that could
Hmm.
be, we might have a true segmentation here of alienation of like I'm going to follow this product as long as it doesn't get too WWE style for me. Bringing them together will be the challenge for Triple H and Shawn Michaels and TKO is to break down those barriers because and we'll get to the positive in a minute. Maybe this will be the last thing for the negatives and let's just be real because we mentioned it earlier. For English speaking fans like us, language can be that barrier. It's
Hmm.
also intimidating to have to learn a new roster with most of those wrestlers all in colorful masks and outfits and wrestling the same style of wrestling, the flippy floppy, as you said, varying degrees of English language ability. It's just might be difficult and a high bar for new fans to differentiate all of this talent at once. They're learning them
And
all at once.
what are the rules? Well, the rules are
Establish them,
different.
right? They are
Yes.
different. And we don't, and if you don't know, you don't know. And watching it, you're not
Yeah.
going to know either. Um,
No.
because back to the whole the new roster thing, and this is not calling you out, Doug, but I mean when they did the NXT reboot, the 2.0, you
Oh,
just like tuned out. Or like this is
yeah,
everybody
absolutely.
knew. They took away everything I liked about it. They changed
Hmm.
everything, and I'm not going to learn all these new people. And there were some good people and some not so good acts,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but it was just all at once. And that's kind of what we're going to get with this for most wrestling fans outside of a
Yeah.
name or two. It's going to be all at once. And some of them don't speak English, and they all can have a similar look that might be different to differentiate with the mask and thing, which might be tempting for WWE to start wanting to remove mask, which gets back into the
Yeah.
whole. But what are you buying? It's Lucha Libre. The masks are important, so it's going to be
Hmm.
tricky. I mean, Worlds Collide, huge success. It's going to be tricky
Yeah.
still. But let's look to end on some positive things. These are obviously, I think, less controversial than the negatives because the negatives you can argue either way. It could go this way, it could go that way. I don't think there's as much room for debate when you talk about some of these positive. Increased global exposure,
Hmm.
unquestionable, right? A AAA talent, Lucha Libre in general is going to gain greater international visibility, TV,
Hmm.
Peacock, social media, just all of it. Higher production values, you can't argue that.
Hmm.
WWE's resources is going to enhance the quality. I've watched some AAA in the past. Nothing I've ever watched looked as good as the first show they did with WWE. That's the best
On
looking
YouTube.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
So higher production values right away. Um, maybe more up for debate than exposure and production values might be this next one. But I still think it probably weighs out on the positive, and that's talent development because AAA guys now have access to the performance center, a whole
Yeah.
training infrastructure. I guess when I say that it can be a little more arguable because some people may not think that's the most positive thing because if you get into those performance centers, there's the concern is that if I'm wanting to be a naysayer, like, okay, they're going to go there, learn the WWE style, and again,
Hmm.
traditional lucha begins to fade away, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But still though, a much larger audience, this NFL equivalent training facility, which I
Yeah,
don't know I don't know of any other wrestling promotion that has a place like the Performance Center.
no, and that infrastructure is more than what AAA has um, before, and Lucha had before, and the same goes for the expanded merchandising and branding opportunities. I think that WWE is operating at the height of its powers. You talked about TKO and things. This is the
Hmm.
most like you will not have a bigger marketing and merchandising power to bring the AAA mask and shirts and characters. Way more consumers are going to be having access to that than ever would on the path that they were all going. I mean, I mentioned earlier, Mr. Iguana, this is happening now. Like they're like trying to mass produce. Let's get and that would not have been happening if not for a single show on YouTube. This is already showing what the potential can be for merchandising and branding. It is off the charts on just the financial side. And maybe that's the good one to end on as far as the positives, because I don't think this one can be argued. And the stabilizing of the finances is really the biggie here, without debate. WWE is, again, at the height of its powers, unprecedented in wrestling history. We've never seen a wrestling organization as financially strong as WWE. And AAA, honestly, has had a rough few years financially. So to know that, I don't have to worry where my paycheck comes from if I'm a talent, or if that, hey, the lights aren't going to go off. This isn't, I think all of that in a time of economic uncertainty is got to be considered a huge positive for the future of Lucha Libre, that WWE is probably best positioned, even if they put their stamp on it. If you're wanting Lucha Libre to survive, WWE, like it or not, may be the best channel for that to happen.
Yeah, because I have heard AAA described currently or during this period as like the dying days of WCW. So
yeah, I've heard that too.
It doesn't
and this
sound
could
like
be the lifeboat.
It absolutely could.
Now, not everybody liked how, what happened to WCW after WWE bought it, but it didn't go away.
That's true. It didn't go away.
I think that this is going to be better. I don't want to be gloom and doom about it. I am cautiously optimistic that while things may change, and again, this is my admittedly biased perspective as an English-speaking fan, but I am going to have access to a product that I'm interested in, that I know has an incredible talent that I am not as familiar with. I get to learn. It's exciting, a style that if they do it like they did Worlds Collide is different enough from the normal WWE product, to me anyway, that I would be all on board. I don't really need another WWE style show. Keep it some hybrid mix of something that stands out as different. And what I experienced last week stood out enough as different to me that it gives me hope that this is going to be a good relationship and not a WCW situation where we just pick the bones of the assets of the tape library, take a few guys, put Ben Kingo on Raw, and kill everything else. That is not what I expect to happen here. It may not be great for CMLL and Lucha outside of WWE because, unfortunately, to your point, British wrestling didn't fare too well with NXT UK. But I think for the AAA guys and Lucha Libre in general, this is probably a great lifeline of support.
I'm certainly hoping so. And I'm not going to be gloom and doom either, because I am very optimistic about this, because I really like what I saw. It was very exciting, very colorful, very vibrant, lots of new energy that I'm not used to seeing, in a full WWE show, even though this was a combo show. I would like to see Conan drop the us versus them stuff. And, these people are fighting for their lives and all, I don't want to hear that. I want to know about this guy's cousin who wrestled Roosh back in the day, and and so uncle taught this guy how to his first headlock or whatever. That's the stuff I want to hear.
There was enough of that gives me hope that they'll learn from their mistakes, but are off to a really strong start that I think can sustain. So
yes.
Let's see where this all goes, and obviously the Two Bros Wrestling Show will be covering it every step of the way, but
every step.
To take us home.
Let's do it. Let's go home.
Big finish. Doug, botch of the week.
Dude, I'm still in your botch from last week, because 4 hours of AEW was it was painful. I have in my notes 4 hours of AEW in one night was painful. It was rough. I still haven't got through it all. There's probably
last week's or this week's?
Yeah, well, both actually. I didn't even try the prior week, and this week I was like, okay, I've got to power through this. I'm getting behind on my AEW wrestling now, and I just couldn't do it. I haven't done it yet.
I hate to repeat a botch. I don't like to go on about the same thing, and I know you just went, so I don't want to keep going on about it. But if Tony can keep going on for like 8 hours on two consecutive Wednesday nights, then I can go on and say, if you keep doing that, you're going to be my botch of the week. If going twice for this as a botch is too much, then your 4-hour shows are also too much, Tony.
Yeah, too much. Do
Too
something
long.
about that. I mean, come on.
Doug, performance of the week.
Performance. Okay, so I'm not going to call him R-Truth, Ron Killings, because I think this was almost my botch because they lean too heavily into the truth with him. But I get it. That's what everybody's familiar with. I would have liked to see after he cut his hair, he dropped truth altogether. And I think Blu-ray did the same thing. Says something similar and busted open because I think that should have dropped it right there. He should have went with the serious character. But what he has done and what he's continuing to do throughout the week, even on like different social media platforms and everything. Ron Killings, killing it. Excited to see this where this goes.
We may be in lockstep for all of our big finish because how can you give it to anybody other than Ron Killings this week? Long live R-Truth. I love R-Truth. You love R-Truth. Ron Killings loves R-Truth, but R-Truth's too nice for his own good. So I'm going to introduce you to Ron Killings, and I'm going to symbolically show it. Have we ever got a holy S chant before, cutting off your own dreads?
Right.
Those fans in that crowd were into every word the man said, and Ron Killings, not the character that he plays sometimes of R-Truth. He plays the comedic character so well that it's almost a detriment how well he plays it, and he brought that out in his promo, how it hasn't done him any favors for being too good at being the funny guy. And so now you're seeing a different Ron Killings. And this is a Ron Killings who is a veteran, who is a former world champion, who can still go in the ring. And as he's shown in his work with Cena and the attack he had on SmackDown and things like R-Truth, this probably is a final run, not maybe one that was planned, but he's going to make it memorable, and to go out as Ron Killings and even to negotiate it that you go out as Ron Killing so that you can own your own name on merchandising stuff after, the days are done. Every bit of it is good things happening for a good man who was legitimately brought back because of the fans. R-Truth, Ron Killings, whatever you call him, he's killing the game right now.
Totally killing the game, killing the business. You go, Ron.
Doug, we might go 3 for 3, being in lockstep here.
Let's see.
Go for your match of the week.
So this was a bit challenging after Raw because Raw was just firing on all cylinders on Monday night. Then, I mentioned, 4 hours of AEW was too much for me, but the first half hour of AEW was really, really great. So I got a shout out to Ospreay and Swerve, and that is my match of the week. It was this close to being that women's four-way on Raw, but then Swerve and Ospreay came through and did their half hour, and that was wrestling perfection right there. Those two could do no wrong in a ring.
So I'm actually glad you went for that match because I had been torn as to which match to talk about. And you talked about the one that I maybe would have as my match of the week. So now I can talk about the other one because
cool.
Because Ospreay, Strickland, that's modern professional wrestling at its finest. And then the main event of Raw was classic 1980s. Jim Crockett promotion. Like, depending on what you were in the mood for, there was 2 great examples of it this week. The modern style of high flying, mixed with some technical back and forth counters, fast pace, that was on display in the match. That technically that probably was the better technical match. But as far as the old school story and a world title change in your main event on Raw, which they do rare enough now that it actually means something when they do it. And Gunther getting that back was actually kind of shocking when you consider how that, Jay has been one of the most popular and over characters WWE has, and they cut his reign before it gets to 60 days. Now, there's a Goldberg reason behind
I
the
was going
scenes
to
for all
say,
that.
yeah, yeah, you can't have Mr. Yeet going against Goldberg, but
You forget the reasons as to why and just look at what they presented, and it was beautifully done. It just beautifully done.
mhm.
Old school selling, the slower methodical pace, but everything meaning something, stiff, and then shocking at the end. It just felt like an old main event, old school 1987 main event from like the Jim Crockett days, and I loved it.
Yeah, and I don't think the announcers get enough credit for putting things over the way they do, where they totally sold that, Jay has just gone out of his way to worry about everybody but himself, worrying about his
Yeah,
friends, doing this,
yeah,
not taking care of himself, Gunther realizing, learning from his past mistakes and not letting that happen again and being ready for it this time.
yeah.
A lot of what the announcers did in selling things throughout, it's really just part of wrestling magic too.
So watch both of those matches. One from AEW, one from WWE. Very different styles, but again,
Yeah.
the very different flavors of wrestling and
Yep.
how you can go about it two different ways and come out with that magic that Doug talked about. And
Hmm. Yes.
with that,
Oh.
we're off for we're done for another show, and we do have a little bit of a change to the schedule, and you see it going there at the bottom. Originally, we had some different topics that were more evergreen. We're going to hold on to those because,
Hmm.
hey, who knew? It kind of snuck up on us, like, oh yeah, not a champions. We got to talk
Hmm.
about that because there's some big matches, some big Cena, CM Punk style matches happening in Saudi Arabia, which is a story
Saudi.
in and of itself. So
Yep.
we are, and Kings the Crown and Queens the Crown. So we got all of
Hmm.
that. We will be previewing in our next episode.
Yes. So until then, go watch some wrestling. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you.